The pregnant woman walked into room 404, and never got to see her baby again.
Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
12:30 a.m. The clock struck under a torrential rain. Laura Martin, clutching her belly with both hands, panted heavily. "Daniel, it hurts," she gasped. Her face was pale, her hair plastered to her forehead, her eyes wild with panic and pain. Daniel Morgan hurriedly threw on a coat and grabbed his set of keys. "God, Laura, you're going into labor. I'm taking you to the hospital right now." Are you sure the hospital's still open? It's so late, and raining. We don't have a choice. Get in the car. Don't worry, I'm right here with you." Laura struggled to take each step, clutching the car door as Daniel opened the passenger side. Every movement felt like knives cutting into her flesh. The Ford Focus sped off into the night, slicing through puddles on Fifth Avenue. Streetlights blurred through the rain-covered windows. "Did you call the hospital first?" Laura asked, gripping Daniel's hand, her voice breaking. "Yes, I did, but they said it's crowded. They told us to come anyway, they'd figure something out." Laura stared out the window, her reflection distorted by the rain. She whispered, "Dear God, please, let me protect this baby." When they reached the entrance of New York Presbyterian Hospital, the sight before them stunned Daniel. People crowded under the awning, some crying, others groaning. A middle-aged man in a blood-soaked coat held his unconscious wife. An elderly woman screamed at a security guard, "I've been waiting 4 hours. My son has a 105-degree fever." Daniel threw the car door open and shouted, "Someone help me. My wife is in labor. She's 36 weeks along and in severe pain." A young nurse rushed over, her name tag reading Isabel Reed, worry etched across her face. "We don't have any beds left, but, quickly, follow me. We'll get her into a temporary holding room." "No. My wife needs an obstetrician." Daniel barked. "I know, but the maternity ward is overwhelmed. Every room is full. We do have a backup room, room 404. It's old, but it has a bed and equipment. I'll call a doctor immediately." Daniel nodded and lifted Laura into his arms, following Isabel through a damp hallway. Their footsteps echoed beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Room 404. The sign on the door was rusted and crooked. Isabel opened it. The room was freezing. Water-stained ceiling tiles. The smell of disinfectant mixed with mold. Laura shivered. "Daniel. I don't want to stay here." "It's okay. I'm here. It's only temporary." Daniel gripped her hand. "I'll call the on-duty doctor," Isabel said quickly. "He'll be here in a few minutes. Mr. Morgan, I'll need you to step out for sterile prep. It's hospital protocol during delivery." Daniel frowned. "I'm not leaving. I want to stay with my wife." "I understand, but it's a required regulation. You can wait right outside the door." Laura whispered, "It's okay, just wait outside. I'll be fine." Daniel reluctantly nodded, kissed her forehead, and stepped out. The door to room 404 shut behind him with a soft but chilling click. 5 minutes later, a man entered. He wore a wrinkled white coat, no hospital logo. His plastic name badge was hastily printed, Dr. Richard. He nodded. "Good evening, Ms. Martin. I'm the attending doctor tonight. Your condition is serious. We'll need to administer a uterine relaxant to stabilize things." Laura asked, voice trembling, I'm not supposed to give birth now." "No. Week 36 is still early. We need to stabilize you first. Don't worry, everything is under control." He turned to a young nurse with tightly tied hair and a blank, stone-like face. "No name tag. No greeting. Prepare the 4, Richard instructed. The nurse nodded and pulled a yellowish bag from a fridge. Laura flinched. What is that? Why is it that color? Richard smiled. Just a mix of electrolytes and a mild sedative. It'll help you feel more comfortable. But, shouldn't I sign something first? Yes, here's the consent form. Very simple. Just a signature. You're in pain, I don't want you to strain yourself reading too much. Laura bit her lip and signed the form, barely able to see the faded words under the dim light. She just wanted relief from the pain. The needle pierced her vein. The fluid began to flow. As soon as the strange solution entered her bloodstream, Laura felt a chill deep in her spine. Her limbs tingled. Something's wrong, she tried to say. Her vision blurred. The room spun. Her heartbeat stuttered. Her ears rang. Daniel! Daniel! She cried weakly. But the door was locked. She heard the distinct click. No response from outside. Relax, Ms. Martin, Richard said in a steady tone. We only want what's best for you. Laura tried to move, but her legs wouldn't lift. Paralysis set in. The nurse stood silently, observing Laura like one watches a body that isn't quite dead yet. Please, don't hurt my baby, Laura choked out. Richard leaned closer and murmured, did you know some children are born to live better lives, somewhere else? The words hit Laura like a death knell. Everything faded into black. Outside in the hallway, Daniel began to feel uneasy. He asked Isabel, is my wife okay? Why is it taking so long? Isabel stammered, I'll check again. Dr. Richard is handling it. Dr. Richard, another nurse, Charles Bennett, nearby, interjected. He's not on tonight's schedule. Daniel turned sharply. What did you say? He's not on the roster. Charles nodded. I arranged tonight's shifts. That name isn't listed. And room 404 was supposed to be sealed off 6 months ago. Daniel's face turned pale. He rushed to the door and pounded on it. Laura! Can you hear me? No response. The door wouldn't budge. Laura! Daniel banged the door furiously. Open this door. Charles stepped in. We need to open this immediately. This room shouldn't be in use. Isabel stammered, I just followed Dr. Richard's instructions. He gave me a signed authorization. From where? Which department? Charles growled. I've worked here for 8 years. I've never seen anyone use 404. It was sealed after a gas leak. Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He pulled out his phone, ready to call the police, when a security guard ran over. What's going on? Why are you pounding on hospital doors in the middle of the night? My wife is locked in there. Daniel shouted. Some fake doctor is injecting her with something. Open the door or I'll break it down. Charles turned to the guard. Julian, give me the backup keys for this wing. Now. Julian, an older man in his 50s, pulled out a jangling key ring from his pocket. His hand trembled. These haven't been used in years. When the door to room 404 finally swung open, what they saw left everyone stunned. The room was empty. No hospital bed. No equipment. No Laura. No one. Just an 4 line on the floor, dripping the last drops of pale yellow fluid. This can't be, Daniel stammered, legs shaking as he stepped inside. She was just here less than 30 minutes ago. Charles thoroughly inspected every corner. No blood. No signs of surgery. But someone was here. Cameras. Daniel turned. Is there a security camera in this hallway? Isabel hesitated. Yes, but the power's been out for weeks due to electrical maintenance. Julian added, this area was decommissioned. No priority for surveillance. The tech team's working on it. Daniel roared, so no camera? No monitoring? A woman 36 weeks pregnant can vanish like she never existed? Isabel said nothing. She lowered her head, avoiding his gaze. Charles clenched his fists, face burning red. This is not right. I'm reporting this to hospital administration. Daniel screamed into the void, Laura. Elsewhere in the hospital, in a dimly lit basement room, Laura lay motionless on a gurney, covered in a white sheet. Her eyes half shut, lips pale. An oxygen mask covered her nose. Richard stood beside a man in a long black coat, his graying hair slicked back. His name, Joseph Logan. Patient file? Logan asked coldly. Richard handed over a folder. All signed. Medical intervention consent, death certificate, and liability waiver. Transfer her to the old technical wing. Call the vehicle. The baby leaves New York tonight. Richard nodded. She's too weak to resist. Everything secure. Logan narrowed his eyes. And the husband? A bit of a nuisance. Seems more stubborn than we expected. Logan let out a cold laugh. No problem. Leave it to me. Within 72 hours, his wife will be found dead due to complications. It'll all be wrapped up neatly. The next morning, in the hospital lobby, Daniel was on the verge of losing his mind. It's been all night, and none of you can tell me where my wife is, he shouted in the face of the morning shift doctor, Dr. Vincent Rogers. Rogers raised his hand calmly. I just got here. The night shift is over. I'm reviewing the records now. There are no records. Daniel slammed his hand on the counter. No admission. No birth certificate. No transfer forms. She's gone. Charles approached quietly and said under his breath, I checked the night log. No patient named Laura Martin was recorded in 404. And no surgical procedures were scheduled for midnight through dawn. Daniel's face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying, officially, no one acknowledges she gave birth here. There's no paperwork. Nothing. Daniel collapsed into a chair, cold sweat breaking across his forehead. A silent scream caught in his throat. On the third floor, in a special isolation room, Laura woke up. The dim lighting made her squint. A woman's voice said gently, Ms. Martin, you're awake. Laura turned her head and saw a middle-aged woman in a light gray coat. Her name tag read Nora Parker, Recovery Support Specialist. Where am I? Laura whispered. You passed out from a sudden drop in blood pressure after delivery. Thankfully, you survived. But, Nora's voice lowered, we're very sorry. The baby didn't make it. No. Laura screamed, trying to sit up. I didn't give birth. I didn't see anything. Where is my baby? Nora shook her head. You were unconscious for nearly 8 hours. We had to perform emergency care. The baby wasn't breathing, no heartbeat. We did everything we could. Show me the birth papers. Let me speak to the attending doctor. I'm afraid, due to how fast everything unfolded, the paperwork is still being finalized. Finalized? Laura cried, panicked. I'm the mother. I have a right to know where my baby is. Nora stepped out. A moment later, a young nurse came in and handed her a death certificate. Cause of death, neonatal respiratory failure. No seal. No doctor's signature. Laura trembled. She clutched her now flat stomach and sobbed, Daniel. Daniel, they took our baby. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, Daniel spotted Isabel Reed again. She tried to avoid him, but he stepped in front of her. Tell me the truth. What happened last night? Isabel lowered her head and whispered, I was just following orders. Richard told me to take her to 404. I didn't know. Do you even know who Richard is? Daniel demanded. No. I've only worked here 4 months. I'd never seen him before. But I did see him leave the technical wing with a strange man after his shift. Where did they go? Toward the basement. Daniel turned abruptly. I'm going down there. Charles stopped him. Wait. I'm going with you. No one's allowed in the basement without an access card. But I know a way. The hospital basement was cold and silent. Weak yellow bulbs cast dim light onto rough concrete floors. The air reeked of old chemicals, dust, and mold. Charles led Daniel to the old technical area, once used for maintaining X-ray equipment. What do you see? Charles asked softly. Daniel hid behind a plastic curtain, eyes wide. In the room ahead, a group of unidentified people in medical scrubs stood around a mobile operating table. On it lay a newborn, pink-skinned, with dark hair and a gently rising chest. Oh God! Daniel almost bolted forward. Charles held him back. No. Stay calm. We need proof. Daniel pulled out his phone and filmed through a crack in the curtain. He caught Richard's voice clearly. This one's healthy, no genetic conditions. Neonatal condition is perfect. Ready for transfer tomorrow night. Charles whispered, they're trafficking newborns. Daniel whispered back, no. They're stealing people's babies and selling them. He could barely breathe as he replayed the video on his phone. The image of the naked newborn laid out on the cold metal table, veins visible beneath the delicate skin under harsh light. Then Richard's voice, ice cold. Perfect neonatal condition. Transfer tomorrow night. Charles clenched his radio strap. We have to report this to the administration. No, Daniel growled. They might be part of it. We need more solid proof. Charles looked at him, hesitant. So what now? Find Laura. If she's alive, she's our strongest evidence. In the isolation recovery room, Laura felt like every breath was a battle. Ms. Martin, please calm down, Nora said evenly. You're experiencing postpartum psychological distress. It's common. Don't lie to me. Laura screamed, her eyes blazing. What did you do to my baby? You signed a consent form for emergency surgery. You may not remember. Under those conditions, everyone was overwhelmed. Laura clenched her teeth and repeated, I did not give birth. Nora froze for a second. Her face remained composed, but a flicker of tension flashed in her eyes. Enough, Laura said, trembling as she stood up. I'll find out what really happened myself. You're not allowed to leave this room. To keep me here, you need a court order. Nora sighed and pressed the emergency button. 2 large male nurses entered. I'm sorry, Ms. Martin. This is for your own safety, Nora said coldly. Laura was forced back onto the bed and restrained with soft straps. She screamed, you won't take anything else from me. At the hospital's administrative wing, Daniel and Charles entered the records department, lined with hundreds of patient file drawers. Charles whispered, I have the internal server password. If Laura came in, there has to be a trace. They logged in and searched for Laura Martin. No results. What about last night's ER entries? Daniel asked urgently. Charles added more parameters. A long list appeared. Laura's name wasn't on it. But under unnamed patient, there was a code, XM17A, admitted at 12:47 a.m. That's when we arrived, Daniel whispered. Open it. The file summary read, female, 29 years old. 36 weeks pregnant. Diagnosis, preeclampsia. Emergency C-section. Outcome, neonatal death. Reason for anonymity, no identification provided. Daniel slammed his hand on the desk. That's her. They labeled her as unnamed to erase the trail. Charles hissed through his teeth, she had ID. She had a husband with her. And they wrote no ID. This is organized falsification. Daniel growled, they'll pay for this. In the basement, Joseph Logan entered a sealed room where Richard was reviewing baby footage on a monitor. Did you give the mother the drug? Logan asked. Yes. Memory suppression agent mixed in the 4. She'll be confused, unable to separate real from fake. And the husband? A problem. I think we should eliminate him soon. Logan chuckled coldly. No. We'll let him believe his wife suffered a breakdown. It'll all fade eventually. Richard frowned. But the technician, Charles, seems suspicious. If he connects with Daniel, then cut him off. Leave no witnesses. Later that afternoon, Charles left the hospital for home when a white van began tailing him. He sensed something was off as he turned down a narrow alley near the subway station and the van kept following. Thinking fast, he pulled out his phone and pretended to film the street. The person in the van noticed and sped off. Charles broke into a cold sweat. He called Daniel. I'm being followed. They know I'm digging. Daniel replied quickly, go into hiding. I'll handle the rest. Meet me at Grand Central Terminal at 8 p.m. That night, Daniel wore a backpack containing a mini camera, audio recorder, and a copy of patient file XM17A. He returned to the hospital, sneaking in via the emergency stairs to the isolation wing. He waited until a nurse opened the recovery room, then slipped inside and found Laura's room. She was asleep, wrists gently bound, her face pale and worn. Daniel approached and touched her cheek. Laura, it's me. She opened her eyes, startled. Daniel? Shoo. I'm getting you out of here. Our baby. Daniel, they took our baby. I know. But we need to prove it. Do you remember anything from that night? Laura closed her eyes, searching her memory. Richard, cold nurse. For drip, then freezing inside, couldn't breathe, then darkness. Daniel nodded. Good. We'll use your testimony. Suddenly, an alarm blared. A voice came through the intercom. Alert, unauthorized entry detected in the isolation wing. All staff proceed to check immediately. Daniel gripped Laura's hand. They know. I have to go. Pretend you're still asleep. I'll handle the rest. Laura bit her lip, nodded, eyes brimming with tears. Daniel slipped into the hallway and came face to face with Nora. What are you doing here? She snapped. Daniel replied quickly, I got lost. I was looking for the restroom. Don't play games. You don't have clearance for this ward. I'm the husband. I have the right to visit my wife. Not at this hour. I'm calling security. Daniel stepped back, raised his voice, go ahead. Even better. I'll show them the video of the stolen newborn from last night. Nora froze. Daniel continued, do you want me to play it in front of everyone? Nora immediately softened her tone. We can talk. Good. Meet me at 10 p.m. at Murphy's Pub, near the back gate. If you don't show, I'll hand everything over to the press. That night, Laura curled up on the hospital bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the yellow 4 bag, the flickering light, the soft click of the locked door. And then Richard's voice. Some children are born to live somewhere else. She clenched her fists. No, my daughter is not a commodity. At 9:58 p.m., Daniel entered Murphy's Pub. The warm yellow light wasn't enough to chase away the cold that gnawed at his mind. He chose a secluded table by the window, set his phone to record, and quietly observed every movement. At exactly 10:03, Nora Parker walked in, no longer in her medical coat but wearing a light brown jacket and dark glasses. She slowly approached his table, sat down, and spoke softly, "I only have 10 minutes." Daniel smirked. "That's enough for you to decide whether to save yourself or destroy yourself." Nora was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "I wasn't part of the baby theft. I just followed orders. But I know this isn't an isolated incident." "Who, specifically?" Daniel stared straight into her eyes. "Joseph Logan. He's the one running it. He's not in healthcare, but he has ties to staff. He pays cash for silence. Anyone who pushes back, disappears from the system." Daniel gripped his water glass, his voice hoarse. "Where is my daughter?" Nora didn't look at him. She poured a little water and whispered, "Tonight, the baby will be taken out of New York. Possibly via freight train, or in a fake ambulance. She has a forged birth certificate, clean records. The adoptive parents are ready. Her mother is alive. She's being held and restrained in the hospital. I know. But if she stirs things up, they'll inject her with a permanent memory suppressant." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "I won't let that happen." Nora pulled a key card from her pocket. "This opens the auxiliary storage on sublevel -1. That's where they hide files, camera logs, and sometimes, newborns. But you have to go now. If you're caught, I can't help you anymore." Daniel took the card and stood up. "Thanks, at least you still have a conscience." Nora didn't respond. She got up and disappeared into the night. At 10:50 p.m., Daniel returned to the hospital, sneaking in through the rear basement entrance. Wearing a chest-mounted camera, he held the access card Nora had given him. The door to sublevel -1 opened, revealing a narrow hallway under flickering fluorescent lights. The air reeked of old disinfectant and metal. At the end of the corridor was a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." He swiped the card. The light turned green. The door unlocked. Inside, dozens of shelves held outdated equipment and stacks of documents. In one corner stood a stainless steel bed with a white sheet, and a few baby bassinets. Daniel approached a bassinet labeled XM-17A, the same as his wife's false hospital file. It was empty. But next to it, a large file folder read, "Laura Martin." He opened it. Inside were the real admission record, crossed out in red ink. An ultrasound from August. A forged painkiller consent form. An unsigned infant death certificate. A fax, infant eligible for overseas adoption. Priority, Canada. Daniel's hands trembled. He turned on the camera and recorded each page closely. Suddenly, the rear door clicked open. A cold, deep male voice said, "Didn't expect you to come this far, Daniel." He spun around. Joseph Logan entered, followed by two men in black clothing, no badges. Daniel growled, "Get out of my way. I'm taking this evidence out. The world will know the truth." Logan laughed. "And you think anyone will believe a man who broke into a restricted hospital area and stole confidential files? What about the video?" Daniel held up his phone. "I sent it to a journalist this afternoon. If I don't check in by 1 a.m., it goes public." Logan froze, his expression darkening. "You're playing a dangerous game. And you're playing with the lives of newborns," Daniel snapped. "Now I want my daughter back." A loud noise echoed behind them. Charles Bennett appeared, holding a security baton. 3 against 1 isn't fair," he said, eyes fierce. "I've been recording since the moment you walked in." Daniel didn't turn around, but gave a small nod. "Charles, hit the emergency code." Charles pulled out his radio. "Code 414 level red, human rights violation. Requesting immediate backup. Armed suspects in sublevel -1. Logan roared, "Idiots. You don't know who you're messing with." "We know. And we're not afraid," Charles replied. From the intercom, the night shift supervisor's voice rang out, "Emergency security en route to sublevel -1. All staff stand down." Logan glanced around. He knew he was out of options. He backed up slowly, signaling his men. The two bolted toward the entrance. Logan quietly raised his hands in surrender. 30 minutes later, police arrived. Daniel handed over all video and documents. Laura was also escorted out of isolation. When she saw Daniel, she burst into tears and ran into his arms. They locked me up like an animal," she sobbed. "I know. But you're free now. And our daughter is still alive." The next day, headlines exploded. Infant trafficking network dismantled at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Fake doctor, Richard, at large, police seek leads. Ringleader Joseph Logan arrested in underground operation. At least 11 stolen newborns identified, 3 reunited with families. Daniel sat beside Laura in a real hospital room for the first time. She held his hand. "I don't hurt physically anymore. I hurt because I thought I was insane." "You're not insane. You're the bravest mother I've ever known." The door opened. A young female officer, Teresa Reynolds, walked in, her face bright with emotion. "We have good news," she said. The infant labeled XM-17A was intercepted before leaving New York. She's safe in a child protection center. Laura covered her face and broke into sobs. "Can I see her?" she asked through tears. "We'll do everything we can to make that happen," Teresa replied gently. The Lincoln Park Child Welfare Center stood nestled between 2 old red-roofed buildings with yellow walls. That morning, it became the meeting point for all hopes and fears. Laura sat beside Daniel in the center's lounge, her hands clenched, palms sweaty. Her eyes fixed on the closed white door. Next to them, Teresa Reynolds reviewed the papers again. "Since legal proceedings are still ongoing, today is just a visitation. No holding, no taking her home. But you can see her, speak to her if you'd like." Laura nodded repeatedly, lips pressed tightly. Daniel squeezed her hand. The door opened. A middle-aged nurse with gray hair, name tag Lucy Bailey, carried in a baby wrapped in a white blanket. Laura shot to her feet. The baby didn't cry. Her eyes were wide, dark, staring at the unfamiliar world. Teresa said softly, "This is the infant from file XM-17A. Since arriving at the center, she's been eating well, sleeping peacefully. No physical concerns." Laura stepped forward, her trembling hands raised but stopped midair. She whispered, "Can you hear Mommy's voice?" From behind her, Daniel said quietly, "She has your eyes." Lucy nodded. "We didn't know her name then. But that first night, every time we played soft music, she'd turn toward female voices. Like she was searching." Laura cried, kneeling beside the baby, lowering her face close, without touching just to feel the warmth. "You didn't grow long in my womb, but I carried you in my heart from the very start." After leaving the center, Daniel took Laura to his parents' home in the Lower East Side to rest. He knew she needed time to heal. As for himself, he continued the search for truth. That evening, Daniel returned to the hospital and met with Charles Bennett. "We need to track every patient who went through room 404 in the past year," Daniel said. "If Laura wasn't the first victim, there may be others." Charles led him into the old records room, once abandoned, now sealed for investigation. He pulled out a file folder from a shelf. "I found the list of night shift nurses during special cases. There's one name that keeps coming up." "Richard?" Daniel guessed. "No. An older nurse named Mary Davis. She used to be the head nurse on the night shift. Retired 3 months ago. But her file was deleted from the hospital system after 2 consecutive missing file incidents." Daniel frowned. "Where does she live?" Charles held up a printed address. Here. A small apartment in the Bronx. The next day, Daniel went alone to that address. Third floor of an old building. He knocked. A few minutes later, a woman in her 60s opened the door. Gray hair, hollow cheeks, but sharp eyes. "You're Mary Davis." She eyed him cautiously. "Who's asking?" "I'm Daniel Morgan. My wife, Laura Martin, was taken to room 404 during one of your night shifts. Please, I need your help." She said nothing. Studied him for a long moment, then opened the door. "Come in." The apartment was small, cluttered. An old TV, peeling walls, the air damp and musty. Mary poured some tea, her voice low and gravelly. "You're the third person to ask me about that room. One was a grieving mother. The other, a journalist. Both left disappointed. I don't want to leave empty-handed. I need the truth." Mary looked at him, eyes trembling. "Is your wife still alive?" "She is. And so is our daughter." Mary let out a breath, filling his cup. "I witnessed at least 4 cases like your wife's. All brought into room 404 at night, always due to lack of beds, then vanished. When they came back, they either weren't pregnant anymore, or remembered nothing. One even lost her mind." "Why didn't you report it?" "I did. I wrote a letter to the hospital director. After that, I was transferred to the record storage. Then forced into early retirement. My pension was cut. They threatened to expel my daughter from med school." Daniel clenched his fists. "They silenced every witness." Mary looked at him steadily. "There's one thing I can still do to help." She reached under her bed and pulled out a metal tin. Inside was a thick, worn leather-bound notebook. "My shift journal. I documented every patient name, time in and out, who signed them in. Some entries include suspicious notes." Daniel flipped through the book. There it was: Laura Martin. Annotated, husband present. Taken to 404 by Isabel Reed. Supervisor, Richard. No record of leaving through main exit. Note, security camera in area ordered off. "A goldmine," Daniel whispered. Mary gave a sad smile. "I hope this time, someone does what I was too afraid to." That evening, Daniel met Charles at a cafe near the hospital. He handed over the notebook. Charles flipped through it, eyes widening. Shift maps, records of camera outages, names of everyone entering room 404, nurses, doctors, infant file codes. "With this, we can bring down the entire network." Charles took a deep breath. "I'll pass it to Inspector Reynolds. She's the only one I trust in the department." At the 1st Precinct NYPD, Teresa Reynolds received the notebook from Daniel. She scanned a few pages, then whispered, "So many cases. Why didn't anyone catch this sooner?" "Because they didn't want it to be found," Daniel replied. Teresa picked up her phone. "I'm escalating this to the Special Investigations Task Force. You've done excellent work." Daniel looked at her, eyes fierce. "I'm not done. I want my daughter legally returned. And the others too." In the dark of a distant room, Richard sat smoking a cigarette. He watched the news on his laptop: infant trafficking ring at major hospital exposed. Primary suspect still at large. Someone in the room spoke. "They found Mary's journal." Richard cursed. "I should have destroyed it from the start." "What now?" "Silence. Disappear. Wait for another opportunity. There will always be vulnerable women, and there will always be a market for infants." He shut the laptop, took one last drag, and vanished into the shadows. "We need a plan," Daniel said, his voice low, eyes fixed on the cafe window where he and Charles Saturday, a decisive strike. "We can't just hand in evidence and hope they collapse on their own." Charles nodded, flipping Mary's notebook. Look here, Richard often left the hospital around 3 a.m. through a service exit near the technical storage wing. But some nights, he didn't leave. He stayed in room D12. That wing was decommissioned in 2018. Daniel frowned. Why stay? What was he doing in there? Charles's tone turned serious. We suspect that's the transaction room. A former guard saw unfamiliar men enter D12 carrying document bags and leave empty-handed. Daniel's fists tightened. They're trafficking documents too, not just children. Charles nodded. We have no audio or video from that room. No active cameras. But if you can get in, plant an audio device, we might catch a live deal. Daniel gave a faint smile, eyes blazing. I'll do it. That night at 1:45 a.m., Daniel returned to the hospital, this time with a professional-grade mini recorder provided by Teresa Reynolds. Charles accompanied him, posing as an electrical technician to get him through the service door of Wing D. Each session lasts about 20 minutes, Charles whispered while unlocking the door. You need to plant the recorder under the meeting table and be out by 3:10. Daniel nodded and slipped into room D12. The room was pitch dark. The air reeked of mold. A metal table stood at the center, 4 chairs around it, and a file cabinet locked with a steel latch. Daniel crawled under the table, pressed the device in place with tape. Just then click. The door creaked open. Panicked, Daniel darted toward the file cabinet and hid behind a dusty curtain. Footsteps echoed. A deep, familiar voice, Richard. You're 10 minutes late, Edward. Another voice, raspy, northern U.S. accent, had to check the border. Security's tighter now. This time, I need all the clean paperwork. Of course, Richard said. This girl's mother is a pharmacist. Father's a software engineer. No disorders, no addiction, no trace. Perfect file. Hand it over. Daniel held his breath. The sound of rustling papers. Edward said, Canada requires real birth certificate stamps. What about the immunization records? All included. Nurse pre-signed. Some real stamps, some forged. You're forging government documents. I've done worse. The market needs inventory. Morality doesn't pay me. Daniel's hands trembled. Sweat dripped onto the concrete floor. Every word was a dagger. Richard continued, When's the payment? As soon as the transport leaves the city. I'll text the code via Ghost credit line. Same as always. Perfect. The door opened again. Footsteps faded. Daniel waited 5 more minutes before slipping out. An hour later, in Charles's car, Daniel replayed the audio. Richard and Edward's voices were crystal clear. Charles was stunned. With this, we can indict Richard and the entire illegal international adoption ring. Daniel nodded. Send it to Teresa. Tell her to initiate an emergency raid. At the precinct, Teresa Reynolds listened to the recording. When it ended, she said just one thing. We now have enough to request a full search warrant for Central Hospital. By 9:30 a.m., 3 hours later, a criminal task force was deployed. Meanwhile, Laura had been transferred to a private hospital arranged by Teresa. With secure facilities and psychological care, she sat in the hospital garden. The morning sun fell softly on the green grass. But it couldn't drive away the darkness in her mind. She told her therapist, Dr. Patricia Vaughn. I remember the flickering lights. That freezing fluid in my veins. And the voice, some children are born to live elsewhere. Patricia took notes. What did you feel? Powerless. I couldn't fight. Couldn't call my husband. No one was coming. Patricia spoke gently. Ms. Martin, you're not there anymore. And your daughter is alive. She needs a strong mother. Laura gave a sad smile. Do you think I'm strong enough? You survived everything thrown at you. That's proof enough. Laura gripped the armrest. I'll testify. I'll tell everything in court. That afternoon, New York Presbyterian Hospital was surrounded by over 20 officers and 2 criminal investigation vans. Reporters swarmed the area. What's going on? A panicked doctor asked. Teresa stepped out of a van, warrant in hand. We're seizing all maternity records from January last year onward. No one goes in or out until the investigation is complete. In the storage room, they found over 30 files like Laura's pregnant women who disappeared from the system. Each file, a tragedy. Charles led the team to room D12. The recorder was still running, now capturing additional calls between Richard and other contacts. The room became a crime scene. Richard vanished. No one knew how he fled New York. But Joseph Logan didn't escape. He was arrested in his Albany apartment while preparing to leave the country with fake documents. As he was handcuffed, he sneered coldly, "You think arresting me fixes this? Those children, they'll never come back." That evening, Daniel returned to the small apartment where Laura was recovering. She had heard about the raid. "How many babies were taken?" she asked softly. "Over 30. From different families. Some cases have been identified, but most are still unaccounted for." Laura fell silent. "Will we be able to get our daughter back?" Daniel held her hand. "With all this evidence, the court will have no choice but to return her to us. But more than that, we've stopped dozens of families from losing their children forever." Laura rested her head on his shoulder. "I want our daughter to grow up knowing she came into this world through love, not dark intentions." The Daily Chronicle newsroom was tucked inside an aging building on Main Street. Inside, a group of journalists huddled around a monitor, replaying the audio between Richard and Edward Sanabria. Richard's voice rang clear, "The birth certificate has an authentic stamp. Vaccination records are pre-signed by a nurse. A few forged signatures, a few real seals." Editor-in-chief Martha Carter, a silver-haired woman in her 50s, slammed her hand on the desk. "Run the special edition." Headline: Is Central Hospital the hub of a newborn documentation trafficking ring? A young reporter stood up. "What about photos? Do we have any images of the babies?" "Not yet," Martha replied. "But we have something stronger, the chief nurse's journal. And a living witness, Daniel Morgan's wife. Set up the interview." The next morning, major news networks across the United States were flooded with coverage. Massive scandal unveiled, black market legalization of baby trafficking. Famed New York hospital under emergency search. Fake doctors, forged death certificates, and babies stolen from mothers. Hundreds of outraged comments exploded across social media. Many who had given birth at Central Hospital began recounting suspicious details from their own past experiences. A wave of public fury erupted. At the hospital, Daniel and Charles watched as police carried out boxes of thick files, sealed computers, and detached surveillance equipment. Teresa Reynolds approached them. "The Department of the Interior has launched a national investigation. We're coordinating with Interpol to trace the international routes where the children were taken." Charles frowned. "What about Richard?" "Still no trace." Teresa shook her head. "We believe he had help. The system may not be fully dismantled yet." Daniel clenched his fists. "He won't get away forever." At that moment, in an abandoned warehouse near the US-Canada border, Richard sat in front of a mirror shaving, changing his appearance. Next to him a small duffel bag containing a fake passport, cash, and a handgun. His phone rang. He answered without asking who it was. Edward's voice came through, "The whole network's blown. Payment channels are blocked. Police are tracing every adoptive contact." Richard replied coldly, "I told you not to use Joseph's channels. What do you want now?" "Split the remaining cash." Then we go our separate ways. There is no cash. There is no separate way. Richard hung up and tossed the SIM card into a campfire. He sneered, all I need is one more shot. New York forgets fast. Back at the hospital, Laura entered room 404 for the first time, the place she was taken 6 weeks ago as an unnamed victim. Now the room stood empty. The ceiling lights had been repaired, the moldy walls repainted. Teresa accompanied her, asking gently, "Are you sure you want to go in?" Laura nodded. "I need to see it. To know I wasn't imagining it." She stepped slowly into the center of the room. On the floor, the marks from the metal bed were still visible. On the wall, a faint patch showed where Dr. Richard's nameplate had once been discreetly mounted. Laura turned to Teresa. "You know, that night I thought I had died. But what really died was my faith in the medical system." Teresa sighed. "But you survived. And you helped dozens of others find their children." Laura replied, "It's not enough. I want to meet every mother like me. I want to tell them, we are not crazy, and we are not alone." The next day, Daniel organized a small meeting with the families of victims, people whose wives had given birth at Central Hospital only to lose their babies without answers. In a conference room arranged by Teresa, 12 couples sat around a long table. An older man, Xavier Gordon, spoke with a trembling voice, "I believed the doctors when they said my wife delivered prematurely and the baby didn't make it. But they never let me see him. They handed me a paper and told me to sign." Another woman, Sarah Harper, choked up, "I was unconscious for 3 days after delivery. When I woke up, I had a surgical scar. They told me the baby had been cremated. No pictures. No birth certificate." Daniel stood. "We'll help you reconstruct your medical records. Teresa and her team have identified the fake file codes. If we're lucky, some of the babies might still be in the U.S. A young couple, Mark and Caroline Reed, asked, "What if they already sold our baby? Will we never see them again?" Laura stood, speaking clearly, "We can't promise to bring all of them back. But we'll make sure the ones responsible never sleep soundly again. And we'll tell our stories so no one else has to endure what we did." 3 days later, the U.S. Department of Health held a press conference. An official took the podium. "We confirm the existence of an illegal infant trafficking operation within multiple medical institutions. At least 38 children are missing, 12 of whom have been recovered. 9 individuals have been arrested, including doctors, nurses, and administrators. Richard remains a high-priority fugitive." At the back of the room, Laura sat with Teresa and Daniel, silently observing. The camera lights swept over her face, not as a victim anymore, but as a survivor. That evening, Laura composed her first email to independent media outlets. "My name is Laura Martin. I had my child stolen from me at 36 weeks pregnant in a New York hospital. I was restrained, drugged, and told my baby had died when she was alive. I will not stay silent. I don't want another mother to scream over an empty cradle like I once did. I'm ready to tell my story. Let me speak." That night, Laura and Daniel sat by their apartment window, watching New York light up. Daniel said, "Tomorrow we'll go to the Child Welfare Center. They said you'll be allowed to hold her." Laura nodded slightly, voice trembling, "I don't know how I'll react when I finally touch her." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You fought your way to this day. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore." Laura turned to him, looked into his eyes. "You know, what haunts me the most isn't being lied to. It's that I once believed I was insane when my mother's instinct was right." Daniel whispered, "And because you trusted that instinct, she's still alive." Laura closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks. This time, they were the tears of a mother about to hold her child again, not through medicine, but through justice. In the small living room of their Lower East Side apartment, Daniel opened his laptop and accessed a secure folder labeled, "Final Submission." He and Charles had spent the previous night compiling a comprehensive case file, including the recorded conversation between Richard and the broker, Mary's shift journal, the D12 audio recordings, Laura's falsified hospital records, victim testimonies. Laura stood behind him, holding a mug of hot tea. "Are you ready to send it?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Just say the word." Laura took a deep breath and said firmly, "Send it. There's no turning back." Daniel hit send. Within 3 minutes, the entire file was delivered to the Criminal Investigations Division, the Daily Chronicle newsroom, the New York District Attorney's Office, an international human rights organization. The next morning, nearly all of New York City erupted. From Grand Central Terminal to Times Square, everyone was talking about the Central Hospital scandal. "Did you read this morning's news? Babies stolen right out of hospitals. Oh my God, I gave birth there. I can't believe it. Doctors, nurses, they were traffickers all along. They need to pay for this." Hotlines flooded with calls. Over 60 families requested their birth records be re-examined. That afternoon, Teresa Reynolds led a criminal task force into Central Hospital. "We have a court order," she said, presenting it to hospital director Stephen Brooks, a graying man with a distressed expression. "Ms. Reynolds, there must be a mistake. We didn't know about any of this." Teresa replied coldly, "You authorized over 30 fraudulent documents without verifying them. Do you realize how many children vanished? I just followed procedure. The department head handled those. We'll find out. Cooperate or we'll cuff you right here." Brooks turned pale and nodded. "I'll cooperate." The technical team quickly accessed the hospital's servers. A technician discovered a deeply hidden folder in the internal drive titled Clean Adoptions. Inside were records of 41 babies, each with an ID code, pristine health reports, and transfer routes from New York to countries like Canada and Germany. Teresa looked at the list and stated, "Every name here represents a stolen life. We'll contact every family. There will be a trial." At a detention center outside New York, Joseph Logan sat across from a federal investigator. "I want a deal," he said calmly. "You'll only get a reduced sentence if you reveal everything: your accomplices, the international ring, and where the children were taken." Logan squinted. "I want protection. And my own lawyer." The investigator replied coldly, "You have the right to remain silent. But every record has already been exposed. The court will judge you accordingly." Logan smirked, but fear flickered behind his eyes. The next morning, Teresa went to see Laura at the safe house. "Good news," Teresa said, her smile unmistakable. "The Child Protection Office has confirmed, file XM-17A was falsified. You, Laura Martin, are the legal mother. You can reclaim your child." Laura trembled. "Really? I can bring her home?" "Yes. Tomorrow. But first, we'll need you to sign a statement confirming your commitment to continue supporting the legal proceedings. Your testimony is a critical link in the upcoming trial." Laura didn't hesitate. "I'll do it. I'll speak. I'll stand before the court, before the press, before the world for my child. And for the others." On April 12, the courthouse in New York was packed. Spring sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, but it couldn't lift the heavy atmosphere weighing down the room. On the defendant's bench, Joseph Logan sat upright in a dark suit that did little to hide his exhaustion. Beside him, his court-appointed attorney silently flipped through files. In the audience, dozens of victims' families sat quietly. Many had long lost hope of finding their children, but all were present for justice. The judge struck the gavel. The court is now in session for the trial regarding Central Hospital, charged with unlawful trafficking of infant records, forgery, abduction, and running an international criminal network. The witness room door opened. Laura Martin stepped in. All eyes turned to her. "Ms. Martin, please begin from the beginning," the prosecutor said. Laura took a deep breath, fixing her gaze on the judge. "I was 36 weeks pregnant. On the night of January 17, I experienced severe abdominal pain. My husband, Daniel, took me to Central Hospital. Due to a shortage of beds, I was placed in room 404, a room that had been decommissioned. A man in a white coat who called himself Dr. Richard asked me to sign a consent form. I was injected with an unknown substance and lost consciousness." She paused for a moment. "When I woke up, my belly was flat, and they told me my baby had died. No birth certificate. No surgery records. Just a vague death certificate." The courtroom was silent. I screamed, pleaded, searched, but no one answered. They told me I was suffering postpartum psychosis. That I was hallucinating. That I imagined everything. Pens scratched paper. Hands clenched tightly. The air was tight as a wire. But my daughter was alive. They took her, planning to sell her through an international trafficking ring. If my husband hadn't gone back to the hospital, if Nurse Mary hadn't given us her journal, if Charles, a tech worker, hadn't helped us gather evidence, I might not be standing here today." The judge nodded, his voice warm. "Thank you. Your testimony has illuminated the darkest part of this case." At that same moment, inside a special holding unit at Rikers Island Correctional Facility, Dr. Richard was being led to a viewing cell. He had been arrested 2 days prior while trying to flee to Mexico aboard a freight train. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. But when the name Laura Martin appeared on the television screen in his cell, he smirked. "Still alive, huh?" The guard beside him quietly locked the door, leaving him alone with the screen, and a downfall he couldn't undo. 3 weeks later, the court issued its verdict. Joseph Logan, 38 years in prison for organizing human trafficking, forging government documents, obstructing investigation, and harboring fugitives. Dr. Richard, 42 years for impersonating a physician, administering harmful neurological agents, child abduction, and aiding human trafficking. 6 additional accomplices, including 2 nurses and a records manager, received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. The verdict was broadcast live. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered and applauded as Laura stepped out with Daniel. Reporters swarmed. "How do you feel after the verdict? Will you sue the hospital in civil court? What's next for you?" Laura squeezed her husband's hand and simply replied, "I'm going home. To be a mother." 1 year later. The spring sky over Santa Barbara was bright blue, clouds drifting gently. Laura and Daniel had moved there, far from the painful memories of New York. In their small hillside home, Laura stood in front of the mirror adjusting her dress. Beside her, a baby girl slept soundly in a wooden cradle. The doorbell rang. Daniel stepped in, lifting the baby into his arms. "Faith." Laura smiled. "That name suits her. She's our hope." Daniel carried their daughter out onto the balcony. Morning sunlight blanketed the small garden. After months of restless nights, panic attacks, and moments when healing felt impossible, Laura was slowly recovering. Daniel returned, kissed his wife's forehead. Their new life bright and free awaited them. Laura Martin's story reminds us that justice does not arrive on its own. It demands courage, perseverance, and unconditional love. In a world often shaped by power and deception, a mother's instinct and belief in truth can be the most powerful weapon. In the face of despair, resistance can save not just one life but ignite hope for dozens of others. No one is ever too small to challenge a broken system.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.